Talo Falava. In December 2020, Samoa's parliament passed the 3 controversial legislations that were rejected by the Samoa Law Society, the judiciary, and several international organizations. Now, their basic concern was the impact of these legislations on human rights and the rule of law in Samoa. I spoke with the resident coordinator of the United Nations in Samoa, Ms. Simona Marinescu, about this and several other issues. But first, on the Universal Periodic Review on Human Rights.
Every country is undergoing a review of human rights every 5 years. Samoa has its 3rd Universal Periodic Review this year, taking place in November 2021. Towards the review that is undertaken by the Human Rights Council, which is formed of member states, there are 3 streams of reporting. The first one is the national report of Samoa that is due on 9th of August 2021. Okay. The second stream of reporting is the United Nations report that is due on 25th of March, so soon approaching. And the third one is the shadow report that is prepared by the stakeholders, the civil society, the National Human Rights Institute, and any other stakeholder willing to put forward a report on human rights. The reports look primarily into the progress that the country has made on the recommendations made by the Human Rights Council in the previous exercise. So the exercise is every 5 years. The previous one was in 2016. There were 129 recommendations, out of which 91 recommendations were supported by Samoa. And 91 out of the 129. And 38 recommendations were noted. So obviously recommendations on which the country didn't think that progress would be substantial in the next 5 years were only noted, and the others were supported. And we start with the review of the progress that the country has made against those recommendations, but we also look into any other new developments on human rights. And I need to put on the record that Samoa has made very good progress on most of the recommendations that were made by the Human Rights Council. However, there are critical areas in which much more progress is needed. And I would like to, for instance, put on the record the fact that Samoa did ratify the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and there is work in progress for a national policy to address disability-related issues. However, we still need additional legislation and primarily social protection legislation for persons with disabilities. We need accessibility for persons with disabilities everywhere in country. We need specific services available to them. We need caretakers. We need the institution of social workers to be able to support persons with disabilities. We have a quite large number of individuals in Samoa with all forms of disabilities, including with visual impairment, as we all know, and the country needs to reach that point where these people are easily integrated in the society and they have access to basic services, and their special needs are being addressed. So good progress on the ratification of the instrument. However, a lot more required until persons with disabilities could enjoy the same quality of life with the rest of the society. There are also very important steps forward when it comes to the rights of workers in country, with the Samoa National Tripartite Forum, the tripartite dialogue mechanism that the International Labour Organization supports in every country is in place. However, formalizing the role of the Tripartite Council to ensure that the Tripartite Council is consulted by the government on all policies, on all laws, on the actual implementation of such policies and laws is still missing. And if I may, on this topic, I would like to mention that there are major concerns that the United Nations has. We still see in this country that the majority of people employed do not have written employment contracts, which is a major fundamental request to ensure that labor standards, labor rights are actually being observed and honored. It is in the employment contract where every single employee can see what the obligations are that they need to honor, what the obligations of the employer are, what exactly the rights are that pertain to the workplace, to the work that the person is doing, the salary rights, the compensation rights, the coverage of insurance, for instance, the pension insurance, payment of taxes, and all of the other obligations that come with the employment relationship between the worker and the employer. And we are going to be very vocal in that regard. It's absolutely unacceptable that people in this country work without written employment contracts. Because there are no written documents, any kind of violation of employment rights cannot be documented before the court. So those are issues that we would like to see advancing. We also want to see that the country is ratifying new conventions. For instance, Convention 190 of the ILO that looks into harassment and violence in the workplace, that would need to be ratified by the country. But overall, to ensure that people working in this country, whether in the public sector or in the private sector, have their rights protected, starting with the written employment contract, is a critical requirement, and we are going to push for that. We understand that there are workers in Samoa who actually are being dismissed. This happens, for instance, the economic contraction that we are seeing right now led to many people being laid off, and then they discover that their pension contributions were not paid, that other obligations were not paid by the employer, and they have minimum, almost absent means to defend themselves because there is no written employment contract to stipulate all this. So those are areas in which we would like to see more progress. We also think that more progress is required to eliminate child labor. So the government ratified the convention. However, we can still see kids, who are street vendors, and children who do quite heavy chores in their families, and at the expense of the time that they should spend in school and continuing education. So those are areas in which we would need to see more progress. There is a national policy on child protection, but we would need to have a child protection bill adopted by the parliament. If not this parliament, then the next parliament would need to do that. So children are not able to make their own decisions. Children have a universal right to immunization that unfortunately is not happening. We still have very low rates of routine vaccination in this country, despite efforts made by the government, despite the fact that routine immunization is mandatory right now. We still see very low rates of vaccination. So because those are fundamental rights of the child that cannot be exercised by the child if the family doesn't take action, we would need to have the child protection bill in place. And I need to say that there are instances in which children need to be protected against their own parents. And this is not because parents would not love their children, but they may not necessarily always know what needs to be done for their children to have full access to education, to opportunities to learn, to opportunities to become, successful young persons in the labor market of Samoa, very good family members, very good parents. So that's a process of investment in children that needs to start with clarity on the rights that children have. So that's another area in which we would like to see more progress moving forward. I think there is a lot to discuss about unionization, so the free association right of people. There is no restriction in any ways that the legislation introduces. However, the fact that the law doesn't ban free association doesn't mean that people actually know that they have that right. So we think that more advocacy is required and more where we would like to be more actively involved. Overall, I do have a message of appreciation for the fact that over the last years, awareness of people in human rights has increased significantly. People now know, women in the community know, all people know that they do have rights and freedoms that need to be protected. So that's great success that we could see. Now, ensuring that those rights are protected, are guaranteed, are exercised, there is much more required, and we look forward to doing more in that regard. Wow. So the report is in progress. We will be able to have it finalized by 25th of March. We took a decision to consult extensively on this report with all of the stakeholders. So we do consult with the government. We had extensive consultations with key institutions in the government. We consult with the civil society. We had consultations with the private sector. We had consultations with the Samoa Congress of Workers, and continue to ensure that our report is accurate, is well documented, as it is of very high importance for the review that will take place in November. As also mentioned, we look into new developments on human rights. There have been quite large debates on the package of laws adopted in 2020. I'm talking about the Judicature Bill, the Land and Titles Court, as well as the amendments to the Constitution. And we would like to also provide our analysis into our report based on consultations in that regard. So there is a roundtable that is being organized to take place most likely on 10th of March, but we would need to confirm the date, in which we will have experts in constitutional law, in customary law as well, reviewing together with us the three laws.
This is locally. Yeah.
It will be a roundtable attended also internationally by some of our experts. So the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights has experts who will attend. So the UN will have its own experts. We also invite internationally renowned experts to help us again provide a solid analysis of how those laws impact the exercise of human rights in Samoa, if in any ways there is any impact that we would need to be concerned about. So that's happening, and we will have again a reflection on how those laws may change the exercise of rights in Samoa based on the expert advice, expert inputs that we will get in the round table. So just want to also mention that this is a very important process for any country, the Universal Periodic Review of Human Rights, of the Human Rights Account. Those reports become public. The actual session that takes place on 2nd of November 2021 with the Human Rights Council, in which Samoa presents progress on human rights, will result into another set of recommendations that the country will need to look into and support and note, and all those documents become public. So we very much hope that Samoa will emerge positively through the process, as obviously any setback, any move backwards on human rights is a matter of concern.
Well, speaking of that, there's quite a lot to take in from what you just said, the immunization and all the rights of the disability and everything. But on what you just said just now, on human rights, with the changes, I take it back to, I'm sure you are well aware with the consultation that was done with the 3 bills and the changes that are happening. Now, leading up to the election, a lot of things have been happening recently between the individual rights and the communal rights. Now we see recently there was some notice by one of the villages to ban anybody from voting for the government. I mean, voting for the opposition, any opposition, but for the government. They also put up severe punishment for anybody that goes against this notice. Now, in your view, I mean, being in UN and everything that's going on, what's your viewpoint on that one?
I think Samoans are highly educated, very bright people who would know that they have an individual right to vote for whichever entity they believe in and for the candidates they believe in. So there is no way to restrict this right. People in front of, the names of the candidates will have full freedom to select, to express their choices. So I understand that in some villages there is still a discussion where exactly the support of the village should be placed. The vote is individual, is again one of the fundamental rights that people have, that is recognized by the Constitution of Samoa, that is also recognized by the instruments that Samoa ratified. Samoa ratified the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights that speaks precisely about the right of people to express, to cast their vote. So I do not see a danger in that regard. I think Samoans would be fully aware of their rights and freedoms, their liberties, and they would pursue that right without any particular risk and limitation.
Yes, maybe in the Constitution and all that's been recognized, been ratified, but it hasn't been practiced in some of the communities. Or the way we see it recently with everybody, they are not aware of the freedom of expression. They are aware they have freedom, the human rights, but they are not aware of the freedom to express.
Well, I would think that, Samoa has come a long way in that regard. Maybe more is necessary to continue to enhance and raise awareness, which the United Nations obviously is here for. But there is progress in that regard. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that the vote is secret. So there is no way that anybody can know how each of you will vote on the day of election. So people need to be aware of that they will be alone with their choice and with their piece of paper when they cast their vote. And it's just, everyone's set of values that would dictate how the vote will go. But that's an individual exercise of a right that should never be limited in any ways, and I'm sure everybody in Samoa would know that. So I have full confidence in the people of Samoa that they will express their vote without any particular interference by any collective decision that will be made. So we will be here. Obviously, the United Nations is an observer during elections, so we will have an opportunity to see how the elections go. But Samoa has made significant progress in ensuring that there is full expression of democracy when the vote takes place. And I do not think that villages trying to guide anyone's vote will be successful in that regard.
Okay, can I take you on immunization? You mentioned something about immunization and vaccination of children. Take you back before the measles and everything. There was a visit by the WHO people here, the Director General in the Pacific, and then the measles happens, and now with the COVID, and now with Samoa's record of having a very low rate of immunization. Do you think that WHO could have helped in any way before the measles hit?
Well, as you know, WHO is one of the organizations falling under the purview of the UN Resident Coordinator. So this is one of our entities present here, and I happen to have been here throughout that time. So I was here in 2018 when we unfortunately had the incident with the 2 babies who died as a result of vaccination, and then with the interruption of vaccination, of immunization until the investigation took place. As you know, that's standard process. If there is an issue coming out of the vaccination, an investigation is to be conducted. So the investigation took place, and at that time, until the results of the investigation came out, vaccination was discontinued. But after the results of the investigation came out, we did push as much as we could for the vaccination to resume. So together with the head of WHO, I had myself meetings with senior leadership in country, and I need to say that there was no decision made by the government to in any ways restrict immunization. Vaccines were provided everywhere in the community by UNICEF. That's the support role that UNICEF provides with the procurement of vaccines. It was just that rebuilding trust in the health system is a lengthy process. So until families felt comfortable to take their babies to vaccinate their kids, and particular MMR vaccination, it took some time. And I also need to express my frustration that at the time when we needed the media the most to help us convince people that vaccination is critical to keep babies healthy and that vaccination should resume, we didn't have the necessary support. I'm just saying that there is an important role that the media plays as well. So to take the information to every single person in the country, to ensure that people make their decisions based on accurate public information and vital public information, there is a role that the media should play. So we learned lessons out of what happened. Again, the government had to wait for the investigation to conclude and look into the lessons learned through the incident that took place in, if not mistaken, July 2018.
July, yes. July.
And then based on the findings, to recalibrate the health system to be able to provide in full safety vaccines to children. We all pushed from all directions for people to come back, families come back with their kids for routine vaccination, but it took some time. And the result of it was obviously a tragedy with many families being affected and babies infected and some of them losing their lives. So we hope that such a situation will never occur again. We very much appreciate the decision of the government to make a routine vaccination mandatory if families want their children to be enrolled in school. We definitely want that not to lead to lower enrollment and participation in formal education, so hopefully that will not be the case. And at some point, we hope that immunization rates will be at an acceptable level. We looked into the demographic health and health survey that was conducted by the Samoa Bureau of Statistics together with the support of UNICEF and UNFPA. So the survey still identified low rates of immunization. So this is an unfinished business for us, making sure that families understand that vaccines are available, all medical facilities are equipped to be able to provide immunization, and we hope that parents will understand the responsibility they have to immunize their children.
That was one of the problems, not having the kids immunized at the time. Right, but I guess my question goes back to after that incident in Samoa, I suppose. It's one of the questions that was raised in one of the gathering was when the government delayed action, wasn't the WHO able to help? That was after the commission report, after the 2 deaths at Samoa. They recommended the mass vaccination, but it didn't happen until the measles. So it don't happen. So I guess that's what I'm coming in with the WHO. I mean, how much then?
Well, WHO took one step forward and brought the regional director covering Western Pacific, Dr. Takeshi Kasai, who flew from Manila to Samoa and who had meetings with the Ministry of Health. In some, I participated myself as well, to discuss the best approach to resumption of vaccination. And we saw changes happen. So at some point, the government has become, very vocal in pushing for vaccination, for people to come to get their vaccines. However, there were still people in Upolu and in Savai who did not act on that particular call that was made. And as a mother myself, I need to say that regaining trust after after babies died is not an easy process. So it's very easy to look around and blame, but the reality is that until it became mandatory, leaving it voluntary did not necessarily help, because people had the choice and they chose not to. They either did not see the danger coming, or and again, immunizing children is a responsibility of all of the parents, and we very much hope that we learn the lesson during the crisis, and parents will never repeat that mistake. And I think we will soon see how vaccination will work with the COVID-19 vaccine coming soon. So Samoa is one of the very few countries who completed the entire planning process required. So they practically followed all the steps to receive the first batch of vaccines to cover 20% of the population with 2 shots each. So we talk about around 80,000 doses of vaccine, a very, very intense process of planning that took place. And the capacity of the health system was assessed for this vaccination process to take place. There are temperature and storage requirements for the vaccines that the country has met, and also handling the vaccine, ensuring that the health system is up to the challenge of deploying the vaccine everywhere in the country. So all those requirements have been met, and we look forward to receiving the vaccine soon. So we very much hope that in this quarter, part of the vaccine will arrive. Very importantly for everybody in Samoa to know is that the COVAX facility that was established, the funding mechanism that the United Nations put together, WHO, UNICEF, as well as the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, the COVAX facility approved the disbursement of the 20% ratio of vaccines to Samoa free of cost for Samoa. So the funds are covered from official development assistance. So of course Samoa would need to be able to have resources beyond 20% of the population to be vaccinated, so for the rest of the population. And partners in the region, New Zealand, Australia and others, committed to supporting European Union, Japan, supporting the country to be able to have appropriate coverage with the vaccine. So the plan is to have 60% of the population vaccinated. I just want to put on the record that people under age 18 would not need to be vaccinated. So that's almost 30% of the population of Samoa. So practically 60% is almost the entire population that needs to be vaccinated in Samoa.
Can I just interrupt? You said people under 18 will not be vaccinated.
No, so the vaccines that are available right now in the market are to be given to people 18 plus, and people 18 plus would be more at risk than our children and youth. And of course, I need to say that science is not completely out with all the answers, so we still watch that space to see what we learn. But Samoa has committed to vaccinating up to 60% of the population, again taking out the young part of the society. And there are some, last minute things that would need to be completed, such as the indemnity agreement with the manufacturer of the vaccine, which would need to be completed those days. And then, of course, the vaccine will be deployed. And I need to say that not too many countries managed to complete this process on time.
Really?
So Samoa submitted the National Deployment and Vaccination Plan on 18th of January. That was the deadline.
This year?
Yes. So over holidays, everybody was busy finalizing the National Deployment and Vaccination Plan. All the assessments required with respect to the suitability of the infrastructure, including the cold chains required for some of the vaccines. So everything was completed on time. So we are now waiting for the vaccine to practically arrive in Samoa.
Any specific dates yet?
No, our hope is that it will happen, the arrival of the vaccines will happen in Q1, so February is almost over, so in March we very much hope that the vaccine will come. I need to say that there is a lot of pressure on manufacturers as well, because there are large numbers of vaccines required. And we hope they will be able to honor those commitments so the COVAX was established to ensure that no country gets vaccines above 20% before everybody gets the 20% ratio. So that's the equitable access to vaccines that is necessary.
And it's a fair, everybody gets the vaccine.
Yes. And why 20%? So all our analyses show that the population most at risk in every country is within that range. So I'm talking about elderly, people with some specific conditions. Mm-hmm. So that's the 20%. And obviously the health workers that are the first one exposed and would need the everybody at the border. So critical and essential workers would need to be able to get the vaccine to allow the economy to reopen and support people traveling and the elderly. So that's practically within that range. Mm-hmm. And resources have been secured in this COVAX facility to ensure that countries that will not need to pay would be paid for from the facility. There are lots of countries, actually 92 countries will not pay for the 20%, one of them being Samoa. The rest of the countries, for the 20%, as I mentioned, is ODA supported, the official development assistance. And because of limited resources, limited fiscal space in those countries where, the economy is very small, of course, the evaluation considered that it would be important, the 20% to be covered from ODA, from the official development assistance. So 92 countries are in that category. The rest of the countries are self-financed for the vaccine. So they would need to have their own financial means for that. So that's practically where we are. And hopefully we'll have good news soon.
Right. The reason I asked about the under 18s, so we have a 16-year-old kid with COVID, and yet they're not getting the vaccine.
Correct. So the obviously there is a scientific answer to that. I would just want to mention that none of the young people who had COVID actually developed any severe symptoms. So once you immunize the rest of the population, even if the younger ones would still carry the virus, transmission will be very limited because people are immunized. So those at risk need to be immunized. And that's the vaccine is has a quite complex formula. So obviously we look into vaccination of people who would be at risk if they did get COVID. Mm-hmm. So young people have gone very well through COVID with very limited symptoms or no symptoms at all. So there's no point to introduce a vaccine in the body if that's not necessary. So, but people who would develop symptoms, and those would be, the older ones, would need to be immunized.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Can I ask you, because you mentioned something about child labor, and it's one of the issues that's been a long-standing issue in Samoa. We have laws, we have all that stuff, but still, like you said, we still see people on the street. What do you think we're not doing right here?
Well, I think we need to look into the root causes of that, because I think parents would not want their kids not to go to school and provide for the family if they had sufficient means for their living. So we talk about low-income families, we talk about poor families, we talk about people who have unmet needs. And the way to discourage child labor is to actually look into what triggers child labor. And That's what we are doing currently together with the government through a social protection program for which we secured $3 million from the Sustainable Development Goals Fund, SDG Fund of the United Nations, to build a social protection floor that would not allow anybody to fall under the minimum income necessary for people to have a decent life. And there are multiple ways in which we are going to do that. It's not meant to provide, to hand out money for people to stay at home. It's not that kind of support. We look into people who have no ways to provide for themselves, either single-parent families or people with disability who would not be able to provide for their families. We aim to ensure that there are jobs and income opportunities made available to the families so that they can secure their incomes. But in situations in which income is limited, the social protection will provide such support. So once families have means to survive, I think we will see a decline in child labor. We also try to do more on early child development and education of mothers, young mothers, as to what is needed for their children to enjoy, good quality of life, from, basic needs, what kind of food babies need to be able to grow healthy, what type of relationship in the family for children to develop properly, being protected against any form of abuse, any form of harassment, and then, yes, unfortunately it does, and then ensuring that families would prioritize education for their children and would find other ways for the family chores to be, conducted, to be covered, and allow children to be in school. We also look into school feeding, for instance, a program by which children in school would be provided with some basic food that would be nutritious. So nutrition is an important part of the education that the early child development program is meant to bring about, to help families understand the nutrition needs that children have and provide the food that is of good quality and nutritional value. So child labor has not started because families do not love their children. I think child labor is a consequence of poverty, low income, deprivation, family needs, livelihood needs that we would need to address.
But in order to get this student out of the street, do you think that it's been concerned that laws have been made but not being enforced? Do you think that's happening here? Because if I can share this with you, one of the interviews we had with the Prime Minister, what he said was, well, that shows how resourceful these children are. That's learning business at a young age. And then we put that response to one of the diplomats, and she wasn't quite happy with it.
So I think that we are missing the key law here, which is the rights of the child, the bill on child protection. So that's why the actual ratification of the Convention on child labor and forced labor more broadly is not enough to ensure that we will no longer see children in the street. So what is necessary is that the ratification of the actual instrument to be accompanied by laws here and by a system that ensures that there is law enforcement. So we don't have the law yet, so the law would need to be soon adopted, and I have full confidence that the Parliament will finally adopt the Child Protection Bill. And then, of course, the law also establishes roles and responsibilities. Who is responsible to ensure that fewer kids are in the street, selling things, Q-tips or matches or popcorn or whatever family gives them to sell. So, and child labor goes beyond the street vendors, honestly. There's a lot more that kids do at home. And of course, there is a learning process that goes through children being involved in the life of the family. but putting such a burden on the child's shoulders to provide for the family is not something that is aligned with international standards in human rights. And again, we need the law to be able to see that a change is happening. So I'm going myself to all the supermarkets and I tell kids, I always speak with kids. I think there are some mothers who hate me because I'm talking to the children, telling them, go home, you need to go to school, you need to... Anyway, I'm just trying in my very small way to pass on the message that what is happening is not what we want to see here. But institutionally, the United Nations is fully involved in that, and we will continue to push for the adoption of the law and actual enforcement.
Well, Samoa will be heading to its 60th birthday, I think, 60th this year, independence. How are we with the human rights? I know you already responded with the Universal Review, but you've been here 4 years now, right?
I think we also, so the United Nations is also taking, a cultural lens into the assessment of human rights, and we are trying to understand if there is any gap. Is there something that would need to change? Taking a culture avenue, if you wish. So I would think that compared to the region, Samoa is advancing well. There is always a lot more that needs to be done. And if I may, I think an area in which we want to see more is on gender equality. And while I'm mindful of the fact that women in Samoa are very strong, very, very strong, we work with many of them. We have a large program here on women in leadership, and we also work with women in the Spotlight initiative that is meant to end violence against women and girls. There are still areas where women cannot make full exercise of their rights, and they cannot, achieve their goals, their aspirations. So we still have villages in which women cannot be Matai, some other villages where women can be Matai, but they are not part of the village council. And I think we reached the point in 2021 in which I'm quite sure all village councils see the value of having women participate in the decision-making process. Women bring a totally new perspective on things as members of the family who take care of everything, members of the family who know the needs of everybody in the family, who know the needs of their children, of the elderly. Women who are extremely responsible would bring a lot of value in the decision-making at the village level. So I'm sure the very few villages that still lag behind will adopt a change soon. Without that, women would not be able to run. We do have a good number of women running this year, and our assessment is that they are stronger candidates than we had in the past. But there could be many more women running and bringing a lot of value into public decisions, into decision-making, into law-making, and that's something that needs to change at the village level. And we advocate strongly women's participation, to the point that we went a little too far by going on TV and saying, vote for women, which is, a strong push. We usually say, women are strong candidates, women are well equipped to be great public leaders. Here we went straight into saying vote for women, just because we believe that the change needs to happen soon. So that's an area where we want to see a change. And then of course we want to make sure that women have access to private property rights, and have access to credit. I would think that every family should value an opportunity to have women run businesses, and women, because once a woman runs a business, I think the woman would take care of the entire family to ensure that everybody benefits. It is our mission. Women are on a mission of taking care of everybody in the family, everybody in the community. That's who we are. That's regardless of culture, regardless of where we come from. That's what women stand for. So we want to see that change take place here as well.
There's a debate going on at the moment. This is among women themselves. Some of them are candidates. That some of them are asking government for a 10% parliamentary seats for women. So that's like add two more seats for women in parliament. Others argue that they rather see women enter parliament their own merits. So there's some results.
Well, I think in countries in which we see the change, introducing special measures such as a quota is necessary because the behavior change is a slow process. So we want to give an opportunity to women to demonstrate that they bring value to the parliament. So that's the meaning of the quota, and it is the same almost everywhere. So it's not Samoa specific. Obviously, we hope that within that quota, the best women are going to be in the parliament. Value is important, but the quota is necessary up to the point that no quota is needed because there is a real partnership in the society and women would be able to run if they wish to run without any restriction, and men would be happy to be, equally represented with women in the parliament. So that's the future. Where we are right now, we think the quota is important as a special measure, and we hope that we will have more than 10% women in the next parliament. That's our aspiration, our hope. After having worked with the candidates and after, assessing their value as very, very high, we hope that more will make it this year, this election, into the parliament.
Okay, on Spotlight. It's everywhere. Spotlight is everywhere. I see posters, I see projects funded under the Spotlight. So you mentioned Spotlight. Could you just share with us some of the projects in the pipeline?
Well, domestic violence is obviously, domestic violence has increased, unfortunately, throughout COVID because of additional triggers. People lost their jobs, they lost their income, and people could not travel anymore to see their relatives, and those kinds of pressures on the family led to more stress that unfortunately in some cases materialized in violence. There is no excuse for violence, and I just want to put on the record that culture cannot be used as an excuse for violence. There is no culture that would allow violence to be a form of expression, and the Polynesian culture is so beautiful, it's so rich that I would not ever associate with any forms of violence. So we look into domestic violence as a limitation of the exercise of rights that women have. So women that are subject to violence would be less likely to continue their education, to be able to continue to perform into a workplace, to be able to exercise any kind of rights and freedom. So taking that particular lens to domestic violence, we want to ensure that in the family, in the community, everybody understands that there is no tolerance for any type of limitation of the rights that women have. And we would like the spotlight to change attitudes at the family level in the community towards improving relationships. We do not want the spotlight to lead to families being, affected, broken, and that's not the aim of the spotlight. The spotlight is an educational program for everybody to understand that a relationship requires investment by both partners. A relationship needs to be of quality so that children enjoy a good life. And if there is anywhere stress coming into the family because, again, of what is happening in country, in the community, the stress could be dealt with in a way that does not lead to expression of violence. So we, in this program, we aim to work with the civil society and capacitate the civil society to actively discourage domestic violence in all ways possible. So not only the victim support mechanism, but also civil society organizations that would be able to engage with the community and change attitudes. So we established the civil society national reference group with 10 members representing civil society organizations, and we work closely with them into prevention of domestic violence, into ensuring that domestic violence is reflected in national policies appropriately. So domestic violence is a public health crisis, and that needs to be in the health policy of this country. That there are referral pathways, that there are support services for victims, and again, we continue to educate communities to manifest zero tolerance against violence. And I think we are advancing well with, for instance, now village safety councils that have been established. This is something that we do together with the Office of the Ombudsman, with the National Human Rights Institute, in response to the national inquiry that took place in 2017. Then the village safety councils being practically a mechanism of support for referrals for people who are victims of violence, but also providing people with information regarding their rights and ways in which their rights could be exercised. We also established a disability reference group, as many people with disability are victims of violence in their family, to ensure that we provide protection measures to persons with disability, and we look forward into capacitating civil society organizations to be able to adopt quality standards in their services. All civil society organizations mean well. Unfortunately, not all of them can provide a service that is of quality and that is useful. Sometimes they may do more harm than good, so the intention is to ensure that they are able to adopt such standards. 40% of the funds under the Samoa Spotlight Initiative are meant to go to the civil society. So this is a significant amount of money, considering that we received $4.2 million US, so it's 3.5 million euros for the Spotlight. So 40% of this would be a good amount of money to help civil society organizations to be of better quality in their services provided to.
So it comes down to awareness programs and people understanding their rights and action efforts.
And also creating services for victims. It's a victim-oriented program. And again, working with key influencers in the community, with the village council, with the church, with any other, faith-based organizations, to be able to play a role into educating couples as to what it takes for a family to be able to cohabitate without violence. And I think the recent healing campaign that Adelina in my office organized and coordinated was a very, very interesting exercise in which both women and men were involved. We used culture as a means of communication. There was a lot of dancing that you could see in which women wanted to express, their hearts and their hopes that, their lives in the family and in the community will be appreciated and domestic violence will disappear, hopefully. I think women tried, and that's what we encourage, to get to the point to understand their value and express their value. So women need to value themselves to be able to defend themselves and attract respect in the family and in the community. We are extremely valuable, we are equally valuable, but many in the society. So bringing that self-respect attracts respect from the members of the family and the community, and ultimately leads to peaceful and respectful cohabitation. So that's the approach that the healing campaign took, the 16 days of healing. So those were during the 16 days of activism. So we dedicated the 16 days of activism to the Spotlight Initiative and to healing, again, using a lot of communication and using arts as forms of communication, as I think art is much more expressive than what words could do.
True, and it works.
Yeah, so, and this was highly appreciated, so we actually shared with the world the 16 Days of Activism, the 16 Days of Healing campaign. From here, we had the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations address the campaign, and we will try to do more of that. So, prevention, ensuring that we have the necessary policies in place, the necessary legislation, the necessary, the level of understanding that is required at the community and in the family, ensuring that the civil society provides services of quality and they are well funded to be able to do that. And ultimately, seeing the society more stronger in fighting violence from within. It is ultimately with the people of Samoa to ensure that violence is no longer an option and that children are no longer exposed to forms of punishment that would affect their mental health, their upbringing, their success in life. 90% of the children of Samoa in the demographic and health survey conducted by SBS reported to have been exposed to a form of punishment within the time of the survey. So that's unheard of. So we need to do better in ensuring that we guide our children, we help them learn without using any form of physical punishment or any form of violence. It doesn't need to be physical only. We should not be aggressive and violent through words, through gestures, in any ways.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I just take you back when you said earlier that the media were not around when they were needed? That was during the measles or prior to the measles?
Prior to the measles, so we've tried, and I think WHO has tried as much as possible to convey messages using media channels to ensure that people would take action.
What's your channel of getting the information out to the media? Do you go through the press set? I'm not being defensive, but even us, and I think she knows that, we tried our best unsuccessfully to get to the health people, even your HWA guy. Mm-hmm. He knows because I've been knocking on his door.
So I would kindly ask you, so the resident coordinator office, so my office, oversees what the entire UN system is doing. So if there is any failure in a UN agency responding to a call for a communication, for interview, please use the resident coordinator office and inform Aterina of that, because the entire UN system is extremely transparent. Those are values that are very dear to us. Nothing that we do is not public, so we are supposed to be forthcoming. So if there is any need for information, so please let us know.
Yes,
and I'm quite sure
we could actually work on this one.
I need to say that the World Health Organization has done an impressive job in this country, getting the country to the point to be able to start vaccination. I'm talking about the COVID vaccination, but also throughout ensuring that there are capacities in place for immunization and for proper health services. There's a lot of equipment that has come with the support of WHO and will continue to be so. So I do not know what exactly that particular instance was, but if there is any issue with communication, so please reach out to us and we will make that happen.
I suppose we're coming to the end of our interview, unless you have something else that I missed or you want to share.
I just want to, use this channel to address the media in the country and to make it very clear that we count on the support that all media institutions could provide to ensure that the people of Samoa have access to vital information, that what the United Nations is doing is known to the people of Samoa, and not only the United Nations, there are other development partners in country. Information is vital to protect our lives, to protect our children, to ensure that We are good members of the community, of our families. We need to have access to information, and that's what the media should do. So we do count on the media as a key partner of the multilateral system of the United Nations here to take people closer to the information they need.